Twitter isn't dead. Elon isn't killing it. Not much is going to change. Let's unbunch them twisted knickers, my friends. Welcome to my Tesla weekend. So this is the full version. You're watching it live on Friday night. Or maybe you're catching the condensed replay over the weekend. It is, of course, whichever one you see on the screen. And a quick thank you to newest Patreon member, Bubba Conway. Your decision to support the channel helps a lot, and I appreciate that. So let's talk about it. There's been so many myths, so many misconceptions, so many truly irritating things I have seen on social media over the past week in regards to Elon buying Twitter. The first one that annoys me is Elon has $45 billion in cash. No, he doesn't. Well, no, he does. He could have ended world hunger. Right, that's not how that works. You see, all right, babies, let's ruin this platform and make this man lose $45 billion. We did it to MySpace, and MySpace was actually fun. We can surely break this hell site. Yeah, maybe. But it's not $45 billion. Even though that's the price, that's not what he's paying. Because he doesn't have $45 billion in cash, nor does he need it. Musk's portion includes a giant $12.5 billion margin loan secured by his equity stake in Tesla. The remainder comes from bank financing secured by Twitter's own assets, a classic leveraged buyout arrangement. Now, this is a little bit out of date, only a few days, but a few days is a lot in Twitter world. We didn't yet know that Elon had sold some shares. Well, he had already bought, 9.5% of the company, probably on margin, maybe some of it was cash, before he went on a selling spree. Selling off over 2 or 3 days a bunch of Tesla stock. Isn't that crazy? So he wouldn't actually lose all that money. And he doesn't actually have all that money. It's a bit weird to think, well, if you don't have $45 billion in cash, how can you buy something that costs $45 billion? Well, most Americans don't have $387,000 in cash, but banks let them buy $387,000 houses all the time. Millions of them every year. That's the average purchase price of a home. So why would a bank do that? Because they're expecting a return on their investment. Well, he could have used that money to help people. Well, maybe this is his way, in his mind, of helping people. But in any case, if you want to borrow money to buy a car or a house, banks will often lend it to you. But if you want to borrow $300,000 to give it away, ain't nobody going to finance that deal. It's a pretty tough sell. Elon will have to sell all his shares. Nope, that's already done. We know what happened. On April 29th, we found out he'd sold $4 billion worth of shares, and then today, we found out another $4.5 billion, and it's possible we will find out that he sold on a third day as well, bringing it to $12 billion, which would be, how much cash he was required to raise. That means he'll still have investors. He's still beholden to them. They still want their returns. They're not investing for fun. They're investing because they believe in it, because they believe he can make a better profit than the old guys could. Because in case you hadn't noticed, everything he touches kind of turns to gold. Apart from Solar City. But even still, if you were an investor in Solar City and you were bought out by Tesla, you did very well. Same with all of their acquisitions. Elon will have to leverage his shares to a degree that he could lose Tesla. Well, now, Twitter is that much smaller. Even if he were to have bought the entire company on leverage, it would only endanger a small percentage of his Tesla, because the value of Tesla would have to go down to probably $200 or $300 a share for it to actually incur a margin call. I don't see that as a real risk, but it doesn't matter because we're past it. This is just another Elon pump and dump scheme. Fun fact, I don't know if you know this, but words have meaning. And everyone, especially on Reddit, the big brains on Reddit, love to talk about the pump and dump. Oh, everything. Elon is running a giant pump and dump scheme of life-shattering proportions and no one bats an eyelid. It's ridiculous. Billions have been liquidated in one of the recent crypto crashes to the tune of 300. The problem, guys, with a pump and dump is once you pump, you have to dump. Dogecoin, a victim of pump and dump scheme by analysts, by Elon, says analyst. Do we know if he sold? If you were investing in Doge, I would argue that's not an investment. That was a gamble. Some gamblers win, some gamblers lose. Musk creates hype with Bitcoin pump and dump. According to Jordan Belfort, if you're not familiar with Jordan, he is a convicted fraudster and the inspiration. He is the actual Wolf of Wall Street. I might pump, but I don't dump, is what Elon said. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with pumping. You can support or endorse anything you want. If you have a financial interest, you're required to disclose it. But we know his financial interest in Tesla. We know he's invested in Dogecoin, at least to some extent. We don't know the extent. There has to be a dump element for it to count. And the big thing with Twitter is, it's not a pump and dump. It can't be. It's going private. Selling shares in a private company is pretty difficult. You have to find a private, accredited investor. And private companies are limited to, I don't recall, 1,000, 2,000 shareholders, some very small number. So the people who would be buying these shares would be institutional investors, the ultra-wealthy, people who are not persuaded by pump and dumps. Elon doesn't pay tax. All this money he's throwing around, this is our money. This is untaxed money. It's our money? Because he does pay tax. We know that. He pays an absolute fortune. And depending which shares he sold to make this acquisition, he may be on the hook for long-term capital gains. Not at the highest levels that you would see for ordinary income, but something more like 20%, plus the California rate of an additional 13.3%. That would put him at, a third of it. So for every $3 billion he sold, he'd be on the hook for $1 billion. Unless, did you know, he could have sold the shares that he bought in December as part of his CEO compensation plan. On those, he paid over $1,000 a share. And the ones he just sold, well, they sold for under $1,000 a share, which would mean he already paid tax on those shares, and he lost money in selling them. He could be on the hook for a refund. Elon said he didn't pay taxes in 2018 because he had accidentally overpaid in 2017 and had a credit for 2018. Yeah, so that's a thing that happens. He could be able to offset this loss against future gains. Well, that's crazy. I mean, he's a cajillionaire. Yes. I mean, he didn't make the tax laws. These have existed for a very long time, and I've never seen any evidence to suggest that he is personally paying lobbyists. Elon will reinstate blank. This is a popular one. This is going to ruin or save Twitter. Maybe. I mean, maybe he will reinstate blank. QAnon influencers believe Elon Musk will restore their suspended Twitter accounts. Yeah, maybe he will. Maybe not all bans should be permanent. There are a lot of things that don't, to me, rise to the level of permanent ban worthy. Trump says he won't rejoin Twitter if Elon Musk reinstates him. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. It doesn't impact my life, particularly, either way. The era of unbridled free speech is upon us. No, it isn't. Got bad news for you. No, it is not. Elon says he wants free speech on Twitter, but for whom? That's the question. But remember, this is still, at the end of the day, a business. Free speech as a philosophy is wonderful, but as a business practice, it's very difficult. Let's set aside that free speech is not the First Amendment and that different countries regulate speech in different ways. Yeah, it gets real sticky. The first thing to note is that the spam bots we're coming for you. They're a real problem, and having a very big account, 80 million followers, with a lot of tech people, a lot of young people, the crypto spammers have attacked his account harder than anyone. You know, a lot of people never see him. I don't particularly see them, but I know they're there. And I'm obviously on Twitter, at 4K Podcast. Follow me. But he would take action to address it. And that would be positive for everyone. But aren't bots free speech? Are they? I mean, if you're a free speech absolutist, maybe. But I don't think he believes that. And I certainly don't believe that. And the big thing is, he'll match the law when it comes to free speech. Especially in terms of like EU's regulations. If you're going to post death threats, you're still going to get banned. Because a death threat is not necessarily free speech. And even if you and I think it is, it comes down to the law. And the law says you can't do that, man. By free speech, I simply mean that which matches the law. I'm against censorship that goes far beyond the law. So Twitter has stood up for the LGBT community because a lot of what some see as just harmless jabs can have damaging effects outside the platform. And that's something they're careful about. Now, Elon famously does not back down from a legal challenge, so he may decide to go a little more aggressive and fight those and allow things to stay up that otherwise wouldn't. But for the vast majority of Twitter users, I don't think a noticeable change will happen. We're only talking about adjustments on the very edges of what can happen. Well, you know that Twitter has been blocked in China since 2009, but the Chinese government has continued to make use of it as part of its external campaign, and they're not going to pressure Elon to do anything about Twitter. Really? Because if I was China, I absolutely would. They still believe in Twitter. They still believe in a lot of things that are posted on Twitter. So maybe those parts of speech will be adjusted. Twitter's algorithm will be open source. Now that's what Elon said before he was buying the company. As an outsider looking in, I think it'd be nice to know what the algorithm is doing, but once you're on the inside, it's a little different. His plan for an open source algorithm won't solve Twitter's problems. You see, it becomes an arms race between the bad actors and the community. And if the bad actors can see under the hood, they know what they're doing. You know, Reddit used to have open source code, and they don't anymore. There's a bunch of reasons why. The stated reason was, well, it was too hard to keep the code base updated. Yeah, I'm sure that's the reason. There's no reason why Twitter would want the algorithm open sourced. Well, it'd make it better. Maybe. It seems to work pretty well as it is, at least for the people in charge. Elon's gonna go broke. No, he won't. You see, for those who don't know, $12 billion is a smaller number than $200 billion. I mean, he could buy a Twitter and lose it every 2 years for the rest of his life and never go broke. So that's not a thing. And it's also very possible that as soon as he comes in, he could begin offering non-controlling shares to additional investors. He could get all of his money back out and have no personal risk. He could entirely play with house money, or mostly so. And, unlike his other companies, he could draw a salary on this one. Users will flee the platform. I saw that in one of the chat messages. Yeah, users are gonna flee. They're gonna flee. Well, some have. Left-leaning users leave Twitter in protest. Bit premature, I think. Hundreds of thousands of Twitter users deactivated their accounts. Okay then, that was always allowed. The thing is, there aren't really good places to go. Wendy's may already be on those other platforms, but most people are not. Mastodon has seen a flood of new traffic, so much so that their servers have gone down. I haven't seen a news article saying, so-and-so announced such and such, here's their Mastodon. Mastodon only has 3.5 million in the entire swarm compared to 217 million daily active users. 217 million is pretty small, and that includes a lot of bots. But this 3.5 million includes everybody, including people who are not active. Well, he's just trying to censor the plane tracker kid, or speech he doesn't like that's bad about him. I've seen ones where they say, oh, there's this picture on the internet. He's trying to get rid of it from Twitter forever. Let's post it. That's not how that works. People reckon Elon spent billions on Twitter to ban the teen tracking his flights. Dumb. So dumb. Elon's pretty hip to the internet. He's familiar with the Streisand effect, which would only make it happen more often. The more you try and hide something, the more it comes out. That's why he only offered him a little bit. He offered him a courtesy amount, hoping he would do it. But, hey. And for that matter, censoring speech that he doesn't like, I just looked up articles critical of Bezos' WAPO, and I found countless ones where people who are literally paid by Jeff Bezos are saying things negative about Jeff or his companies. Because it is, at the end of the day, still a business. And he can separate those things. Sometimes bad things need to be said. This will consume his limited time. Who would say such a thing? Well, me, for one. So I looked into it. And it turns out he's reportedly lined up a new CEO and shared ideas for monetizing tweets. You see, he's already spending quite a lot of his time on Twitter. So let's get into the Q&A. If you got questions, post them. We've only got about 7 minutes left. We're going to get through them. And a quick thank you to my Patreons who get early access, bonus content, an ad-free experience, help keep the channel running. All that good stuff. Yeah. Well, there it is, and there you go. If you want to see the full, uncut, 30-ish minute version of this episode, head over to the second channel, link in the description, and subscribe over there if you want to catch these live each Friday at 7 p.m. Pacific, as well as the Fast Charging with B&B podcast, co-hosted with Bear from Bear's Workshop. So, what did I miss or misunderstand? Tell me in the comments, and stay tuned, stay juicy, and I can't wait to hear from you clever robots on the other side.